Do you want to know about a tree so productive, so generous that it can feed people for up to 9 months of the year, yet we nearly erased it from history? A tree that once produced more food per acre than corn grew with almost no care and fed entire civilizations long before modern agriculture existed. Today, most people have never even heard its name. This is the story of a forgotten giant, a survival tree, a lost staple of the tropics, and one of the most underrated food plants on Earth. This is the breadnut tree. 1. Breadnut tree, Brosimum alicastrum. The breadnut tree is far more than a forgotten tropical species. It is one of the most productive, resilient, and misunderstood food trees humanity has ever known. Long before modern agriculture, fertilizers, tractors, or monocultures, this tree quietly sustained entire civilizations. Indigenous peoples of Central America, southern Mexico, and the Caribbean, especially the ancient Maya, relied on breadnut as a dependable year-round foundation of their diet. It was not a backup crop, it was a primary food source. What makes the breadnut tree extraordinary begins with its sheer scale and longevity. This is a true forest giant, often reaching 80 to 100 feet tall, with a wide, dense canopy that creates its own microclimate below. A single tree can live for hundreds of years, producing food for generation after generation. Unlike annual crops that must be replanted every season, breadnut asks for patience once, and then gives continuously for a lifetime. Its growth habit is deeply regenerative. While modern agriculture strips soil of nutrients, breadnut improves it. Its extensive root system stabilizes the ground, prevents erosion, and enhances soil structure. The thick layer of fallen leaves decomposes into rich organic matter, feeding microbes and replenishing nutrients naturally. Over time, land planted with breadnut becomes more fertile, not less. The productivity of this tree is almost hard to believe. A mature breadnut can produce hundreds of pounds of edible seeds each year, often over a fruiting period that stretches 6 to 9 months. That means food availability across seasons, including times when other crops fail due to drought, floods, or pests. While corn demands constant labor, cleared land, weeding, and harvesting, breadnut produces food with minimal human input. The seeds simply fall when ripe, year after year. Nutritionally, breadnut is exceptionally dense. The seeds contain complex carbohydrates for long-lasting energy, a significant amount of protein for a plant food, high levels of fiber, and essential minerals such as calcium, iron, potassium, magnesium, and zinc. They also contain all essential amino acids, making them a rare and valuable protein source. When roasted, breadnut seeds taste similar to chestnuts, potatoes, or freshly baked bread, mild, comforting, and filling. The versatility of breadnut as a food is remarkable. The seeds can be boiled like potatoes, roasted over fire, ground into flour, fermented, or mashed into porridges and doughs. Breadnut flour is naturally gluten-free, making it suitable for people with celiac disease or gluten sensitivity. Dried seeds can be stored for long periods, making breadnut an excellent food security crop in both traditional and modern contexts. In terms of calories per acre, breadnut competes directly with, and in some cases surpasses, corn, but without the ecological damage. Corn requires cleared land, repeated planting, and constant human labor. Breadnut requires a forest mindset instead of a field mindset. Once planted, it produces without destroying ecosystems. So how did such a powerful food tree nearly disappear? The decline of breadnut was not accidental. During European colonization, indigenous agricultural systems were actively dismantled. Forest-based food production was labeled backward or primitive, while monoculture farming was imposed for export profits. Breadnut forests were cut down to make room for sugarcane, cattle pasture, and industrial crops. Over time, the cultural knowledge of how to harvest, process, and value breadnut was lost. In some regions, breadnut trees were intentionally removed because they were considered wild, inconvenient, or incompatible with mechanized farming. Ironically, the very traits that made breadnut superior, its size, resilience, and independence, made it unsuitable for an agricultural system built on control, short-term yield, and profit extraction. Yet despite centuries of destruction, the breadnut tree survived. This species is astonishingly resilient. It tolerates drought, flooding, hurricanes, poor soils, fire damage, and long periods of neglect. If cut down, it often resprouts from the stump. It thrives without fertilizers, pesticides, or irrigation. Ancient trees still stand today in villages, forests, and abandoned lands, living remnants of a forgotten food system. Beyond feeding humans, breadnut is an ecological keystone species. Its canopy provides shelter for birds, bats, and insects. Its fruit feeds wildlife. Its roots stabilize landscapes and protect watersheds. In agroforestry systems, breadnut supports shade-loving understory crops such as cacao, coffee, vanilla, bananas, turmeric, ginger, and medicinal plants. It creates abundance not just for people, but for entire ecosystems. Modern science is now catching up to ancient knowledge. Researchers and food security experts are studying breadnut as a solution to climate change, hunger, and land degradation. Unlike annual grains, breadnut does not require repeated deforestation. Once planted, it locks carbon into the soil and biomass while feeding people for generations. One mature tree can feed a family. A small grove can support a village. Growing breadnut is surprisingly simple if you have the right climate. It thrives in tropical and subtropical regions with warm temperatures and moderate to high rainfall. It prefers well-drained soils but adapts to many conditions. Young trees benefit from some care during the first few years, including protection from grazing animals and occasional watering. After establishment, they become largely self-sufficient. The challenge with breadnut is not biology. It is awareness. You will not find breadnut seeds in most grocery stores. It is not promoted by industrial agriculture. There are no global corporations marketing it. But that absence is part of its importance. Breadnut represents a different vision of food, one based on resilience instead of dependence, abundance instead of scarcity, and long-term thinking instead of short-term profit. Imagine cities lined with food trees instead of sterile ornamentals. Imagine shade that also feeds people. Imagine forests that nourish communities instead of being cleared for fragile crops. The breadnut tree proves this is not a fantasy. It is a return to something humanity once understood deeply. This tree fed civilizations for centuries. It rivaled and outperformed corn. It survived colonization, deforestation, and neglect. And it is still standing. The only question left is whether we choose to remember it and plant it before we lose the chance again. 2. Sago palm, nature's starch factory. The sago palm, scientifically known as Metroxylon sagu, is a remarkable plant that has sustained communities for thousands of years, particularly across Southeast Asia. Unlike conventional crops that require tilling, irrigation, and chemical fertilizers, the sago palm thrives in wet, swampy, and flood-prone areas where traditional agriculture is often impossible. Its resilience and productivity make it a true marvel of natural food systems. One of the most extraordinary features of the sago palm is its ability to store vast quantities of starch in its thick, fibrous trunk. This starch can be extracted and processed into sago flour, which serves as a staple food, providing enough sustenance to feed an entire family for months. In regions where rice or other grains are difficult to cultivate, the sago palm acts as a reliable, energy-dense resource, turning wetlands and swampy areas into sustainable food systems. Sago palms are low maintenance and remarkably eco-friendly. They do not require chemical fertilizers, irrigation, or labor-intensive care, which makes them ideal for small communities relying on natural abundance. The palm's adaptability allows it to flourish in environments that would otherwise remain uncultivated, converting marginal land into productive, life-sustaining landscapes. Historically, sago palms have been an integral part of human survival in Southeast Asia. Indigenous communities have relied on this plant not only for food, but also for cultural practices, trade, and local economies. Beyond human consumption, the sago palm supports local ecosystems, providing habitat and shelter for a variety of wildlife in wetland areas. In essence, the sago palm represents a forgotten agricultural hero. A perennial starch producer that grows naturally, requires minimal intervention, and has the power to transform swamps and wetlands into thriving, sustainable food systems. Its legacy is a testament to the ingenuity of traditional knowledge and the potential of perennial plants to feed people while protecting ecosystems. 3. Chestnut trees, Castanea species. The original grain tree of Europe and Asia long before wheat fields and potato farms dominated Europe, chestnut trees were the backbone of survival for millions of people. Across southern Europe, the Caucasus, and parts of Asia, entire mountain communities depended almost entirely on chestnuts for their daily calories. These trees weren't just a food source, they were a way of life. Chestnuts are unique among nuts because they are high in carbohydrates and low in fat, making them nutritionally closer to grains than to almonds or walnuts. They are rich in complex carbs, fiber, vitamin C, potassium, and antioxidants. Dried chestnuts can be ground into flour, used to make bread, porridge, pasta, and cakes, staples that sustained populations through long winters and frequent famines. Chestnut trees are incredibly long-lived. Many produce for hundreds of years, with some historic trees still bearing fruit after half a millennium. Once mature, a single tree can deliver massive annual harvests, often hundreds of pounds of edible nuts every season. Unlike annual grains, chestnuts require no plowing, no replanting, and minimal ongoing labor. These trees thrive in temperate climates, especially in mountainous or hilly regions where conventional agriculture is difficult. Their deep roots stabilize slopes, prevent erosion, and improve soil health. Fallen leaves create rich forest mulch, and chestnut groves often support diverse ecosystems beneath their canopy. Entire cultures once survived almost exclusively on chestnuts, from rural Italy and France to parts of Spain, Switzerland, and Japan. In some regions, chestnuts were called the bread of the poor, not because they were inferior, but because they were dependable, abundant, and free. Modern agriculture nearly erased chestnuts due to disease, deforestation, and the rise of annual grain farming. Yet today, disease-resistant varieties are being replanted, and interest is returning as people rediscover chestnuts as a climate-resilient, perennial staple food. Like breadnut and breadfruit, chestnut trees represent a forgotten truth. The most powerful food systems are not fields, they are forests. 4. Oak trees, acorns, Quercus species. The forgotten forest grain. Long before agriculture as we know it existed, oak trees were already feeding humanity. For tens of thousands of years, acorns were a foundational food source for indigenous peoples across Europe, Asia, North Africa, and North America. Entire cultures were built around oak forests, not as wilderness, but as living pantries that produced food reliably year after year with no planting, no plowing, and no irrigation. What makes oaks so remarkable is their sheer productivity combined with extreme longevity. A single mature oak can live for several centuries and, during good mast years, drop thousands of pounds of acorns. That amount of food energy is staggering when you consider it comes from one tree, growing on land often considered too poor or dry for conventional crops. Acorns are extremely calorie-dense. They are rich in complex carbohydrates and healthy fats, making them one of the most energy-rich wild foods available. Historically, this made them ideal for survival, long winters, and times of scarcity. Unlike many fruits or vegetables, acorns can be dried and stored for years, providing true food security. The main challenge with acorns is tannins, which give them a bitter taste. But indigenous cultures mastered simple processing techniques thousands of years ago. By leaching crushed or ground acorns in water, sometimes cold, sometimes hot, the tannins are removed, leaving behind a mild, nutty flour. This flour can be baked into bread, cooked into porridge, thickened into stews, or even pressed for oil. Oak trees thrive where many crops fail. They tolerate drought, poor soils, rocky ground, and wide temperature swings. Their deep root systems stabilize soil, prevent erosion, and access water far below the surface. Oaks also support entire ecosystems, feeding wildlife, insects, birds, and fungi, while enriching the soil beneath them through leaf litter and mycorrhizal networks. In modern times, acorns have been dismissed as famine food or forgotten entirely. Yet from a resilience perspective, oak trees may be one of the most powerful long-term food strategies available. They require patience, but once established, they feed generations. In a world facing climate instability, the idea of planting trees that produce reliable calories for centuries is no longer radical. It's practical. 5. Mesquite, Prosopis species. The ultimate desert survival food tree. Where rainfall is scarce, temperatures are extreme, and conventional agriculture collapses, mesquite thrives. This legendary desert tree fed indigenous peoples across the American Southwest, Mexico, and parts of South America for thousands of years, often in landscapes where corn, wheat, and vegetables simply could not survive. Mesquite produces long, bean-like pods that are naturally sweet, aromatic, and highly nutritious. When dried and ground whole, pods and all, they become a fine flour with a warm, caramel-like flavor. Unlike refined grains, mesquite flour has a low glycemic index, meaning it releases energy slowly and steadily without spiking blood sugar. This made it ideal for sustained energy in harsh environments. Nutritionally, mesquite pods are impressive. They contain complex carbohydrates, protein, fiber, calcium, magnesium, potassium, and important amino acids. Because the sugar in mesquite is bound within fiber, it behaves very differently in the body than refined sugar. Traditionally, mesquite flour was used to make flatbreads, porridges, drinks, and fermented foods. One of mesquite's most extraordinary traits is its relationship with the soil. As a nitrogen-fixing tree, it actively improves fertility in some of the poorest landscapes on Earth. Its roots pull nitrogen from the air and store it in the soil, allowing other plants to grow nearby. Its deep taproots, sometimes reaching more than 150 feet, draw up water and minerals from far below the surface, creating islands of life in the desert. Mesquite is almost impossible to kill. It survives extreme heat, prolonged drought, grazing, fire, and neglect. Even when cut down, it often resprouts stronger than before. This resilience made it a cornerstone of desert food systems, where reliability mattered more than yield perfection. Colonization and industrial agriculture labeled mesquite as a weed or invasive, leading to massive eradication campaigns. Millions of acres of mesquite were destroyed to make way for cattle pasture, ironically replacing a food-producing, soil-building tree with systems that degraded the land. Today, mesquite is being rediscovered as a climate-resilient food source. It produces food where almost nothing else will. It requires no irrigation, no fertilizer, and no replanting. In a future with expanding deserts and water scarcity, mesquite may prove more valuable than many modern crops.